guys, this is Kaylee from Pintuck and Purl, and I'm here with the last video of our Joyful Stars Quiltalong video series. So today we are going to be sewing our smaller strips onto our blocks and sewing them together. This is the sashing. It is the background, called the background in the pattern, but typically in quilting this is called sashing. So I'm going to kind of show you the layout on how we are going to add the sashing to some of our blocks, sew those together into strips, add the longer sashing pieces, and then add the border on. So I'm going to head over to the cutting table just to show you how that is going to lay out, and then we will get to some sewing.
All right, so here I've got one row of my blocks laid out, and as you can see, I'm only going to sew two pieces of the short sashing onto this row, just in between the blocks. So I'm going to sew right there and right there. And then after I have ironed these open, or I probably will do it before I iron them, to be honest, I will sew again right there and right there so that it makes one long strip of the blocks. All right, so here I am at the sewing machine, and as you can see, I'm not going to use pins here because I don't have to line anything up specifically, but I am going to make sure that the ends of my strip line up with the ends of my block here. And I'm going to sew down that seam, again making sure that my seam allowances will lie under the presser foot the way that I want them to. So you might notice that I'm using a different sewing machine in today's video than I have in our past videos. Today I am sewing on the Bernina 335. It is a small but very powerful sewing machine. Alright, so laid out on the table here, I am making sure that I've got my blocks in the right order for this row, and I am taking those blocks that have got one sashing strip sewn to them and sewing them together into the complete row. So that row will be one piece and it will be together moving forward. So just making sure that my seams are all lined up. I will do this first with the two pieces that have got the sashing pieces already sewn on them, and then with the piece that doesn't yet have any pieces sewn on it. Because this last darker piece here in front of me is going to be the bottom or the end of my row, it only has a sashing strip on one side. So don't go too crazy and sew, the little shorter sashing pieces to all of your blocks because it will be too many. You need to focus a little bit on the layout and where those middle intersections of the blocks will be. So on the table next to me here, I have got my 3 rows all sewn together into one piece, each of them, and I'm going to begin sewing those longer sashing strips onto them. So for the baby quilt, these are less than the width of fabric, which is perfect. However, if you are making the throw or a larger size quilt, you might need to piece a strip together. You probably will need to piece a strip together because the 4 or more blocks together is going to be longer than 45 inches, which is most likely the width of your fabric. I know that we had a couple of questions about that, so you will have to do that for this step here, these longer sashing strips, as well as everybody is going to have to do it for the border strip that goes around the outside. That's the 3-inch wide strip. You will definitely have to piece a couple of pieces together to get that length that's necessary. So my next step is going to be bringing these pieces over to the ironing board, and miraculously I am back. So I have got these already pinned in place, and I wanted to show you guys that I sort of eyeballed where the 2 sashing pieces would meet up on either side of that long sashing strip to make sure that that looks straight and they are not too off grain. I do have the 2 seams that I need to sew lined up right on top of each other so that I can kind of do them real quick without having to rearrange my fabric too much. So one thing to note is that as you are sewing with these longer pieces of fabric or sewing these blocks together, you might have to move the excess fabric of the quilt top around more on the right-hand side of your sewing machine. This is sort of just part of the game once you are sewing bigger pieces together to keep it all so that it is feeding nicely through the machine and you don't have too much drag because those extra pieces are caught up or are otherwise going to get caught up and impede your sewing. Alright, so I'm going to extra fast forward here just to show you guys I am sewing that last strip on, or sewing all of my pieces together along that last strip, taking out my pins as I get to them, and here I am finishing up the end of that. So I'm going to go away cut off any of those little end pieces that I have on the edge of my quilt. And here I am back. So I have pinned the outside border on my quilt. I did this for two reasons. One of them being I did not want any of the seams that I had to piece together for this exterior border to land right on a corner or really close to a corner where I was sewing this on. The other reason is that if you stretch your border too much as you are putting it on, or stretch the quilt block section too much, you can get really wavy borders that do a bunch of fun 3D things that in quilting we don't really want. So if you pin it out ahead of time, it will just make everything sit better together. So that is my tip here. Pin on the borders, trying not to get any of those seams too close to the corners.
All right, guys, so hopefully that was clear and you guys have got your quilt tops together. So I'm just gonna go over once again when we can see all of this. So first I sewed sashing onto my blocks, just the small sashing bits. Did the big sashing to pull all of my strips together, and then the border around the outside. I hope you guys enjoyed this quilt along and have enjoyed making your quilts. Maybe we've got some new quilters out there excited to make new stuff. If you have not followed us before, you can give us a follow here on our YouTube channel as well as on Facebook and Instagram at Pintuck and Purl. And maybe we'll see you in the shop at Pintuck and Purl here in Northampton. So we hope to see you guys soon. We hope that you really enjoyed this quilt along, and thanks for joining us.